The broken slave. The market was a loud and crowded place filled with people from all across the galaxy. Strange creatures, bright colors, and the smell of alien foods filled the air. But amid all the noise, there was one thing that stood out. Her. She was an alien woman, broken and bruised, pushed forward by two large guards who held her tightly by her arms. Her head was low, her eyes hidden beneath her matted hair. She was just another slave, ready to be sold to the highest bidder. Around her, the market continued its chaotic business. Traders shouted their prices, their voices rising above the crowd, offering strange goods and services from far-off planets. But no one cared about her. They only cared about what they could buy and sell. She was nothing but a product. The auctioneer, a tall man with sharp eyes, looked at her with disdain. "A broken one," he muttered under his breath, glancing at her dirty, bruised face. "No one will pay much for this one." The crowd laughed. They didn't see a person. They saw a price tag. 10 credits. That was all she was worth. 10 credits for a broken slave. As the auctioneer called for bids, the crowd jeered. 10 credits for the slave. 10 credits, he repeated. Some of the buyers smirked. Others turned away. They were looking for something stronger, something more useful. But not her. She was weak. She couldn't stand tall. She couldn't fight. She was just a girl who had been crushed by life, and now she was nothing more than a piece of merchandise. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to run, to escape, to hide from the cruel eyes that watched her. But she couldn't move. She had been beaten too many times. The guards held her in place, their hands like iron chains, and she knew she was trapped. Her eyes wandered around the crowded marketplace, hoping for some sign, some way out of this nightmare. But all she saw were cold faces. The humans in the crowd looked down on her, their eyes filled with disinterest. She had nothing left, no hope, no will to fight. The auctioneer's voice cut through her thoughts. 10 credits. 10 credits. Anyone? Anyone at all? The crowd seemed to lose interest, and the auctioneer looked frustrated. Only 10 credits for this useless slave, he shouted, clearly hoping someone would make a bid. But no one did. The alien woman felt her heart sink even further. She was worthless, a thing no one wanted. And then she heard a voice. A voice that didn't belong to the market. 10 credits. The voice was firm and calm, cutting through the noise. The alien woman looked up, her eyes blurry from the tears she had been holding back. In front of her stood a man, a human. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, someone was looking at her like she mattered. The auctioneer looked surprised. You? You want to buy this one? He asked, raising an eyebrow. She's nothing but trouble, broken and useless. Are you sure? The man nodded. 10 credits, he repeated, his voice steady. The crowd fell silent. No one expected this. No one cared about the alien woman, yet this human was willing to pay for her. Was it pity? Or was there something more? The alien woman felt a flicker of something. Hope. She didn't know, but she couldn't understand why a human would care enough to buy her. No one had ever treated her with kindness before. Her mind raced with questions, and she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The auctioneer, after a brief hesitation, took the money. Fine, he said gruffly. She's yours. The man walked forward, his face serious and kind. He reached out a hand to her, and she recoiled at first. She had learned to fear the touch of others, but this time, the human didn't hurt her. He gently lifted her chin and spoke softly. You're not worthless. She stared at him, unsure of what he meant. She had never heard those words before, not from anyone. She had been called many things in her life, but never that. Worthless. Broken. Useless. She had heard those so many times. But this was different. His words had weight. They weren't like the others. Come with me, the man said, his voice kind but firm. You're safe now. The guards let go of her, and she followed him, unsure of what to do next. She wasn't used to being treated with respect. She wasn't used to kindness. But as they walked out of the market, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She didn't know who this man was. She didn't know why he had bought her. But for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something better. The unlikely bitter. The alien woman could hardly believe it as the human man led her away from the auction. She had expected him to take her somewhere dark, somewhere where she would be used and discarded. But instead he gently guided her through the crowded streets, his grip light on her arm. She didn't understand why he was doing this. She had been sold before many times, to cruel masters who cared only for what they could take from her. But this man, this human, was different. His hand wasn't rough. It didn't pull her along as though she were an object to be owned. It was steady, reassuring, as if he believed she could walk on her own. They didn't speak much. She was too afraid to say anything, too uncertain about what was happening. She didn't trust words anymore, not after all the broken promises and cruel lies. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions, but the man didn't seem to mind. He simply walked with her, occasionally glancing down at her as if he were trying to read her thoughts. Her feet dragged as they walked through the narrow alleyways and quiet streets of the city. She was used to the cold looks, the disgust that people had for her kind. But here, in this strange new world, there was nothing. The human didn't look at her with disdain or pity. He just walked. She couldn't help but glance up at him. He wasn't tall, but there was something strong about him. His shoulders were broad, his eyes steady. There was a kindness in them that confused her. Could it be real? Or was this just another game? Another way for someone to buy her trust, only to tear it apart later? The man noticed her gaze and turned, his head slightly catching her eyes. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice soft yet firm. "I won't hurt you." The alien woman felt a strange warmth spread through her chest at his words, but she quickly shut it down. He could be lying. They all lied. They came to a stop outside a small building, simple and unadorned, just like the man. She looked at it, warily, unsure of what to expect next. The door creaked as the human man pushed it open and gestured for her to enter. She hesitated at the threshold, unsure whether to step inside. The last time she had trusted someone enough to follow them inside, it had ended in pain and betrayal. But the human man waited patiently, watching her, his expression unreadable. It wasn't the look of someone eager to get what they wanted. It wasn't predatory or controlling. It was neutral, as if he was simply waiting for her to make her choice. She had never had a choice before. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The air smelled clean, fresh, not like the stale, grimy air of the market. The warmth of the building was a welcome change, especially after the cold winds that had bitten at her skin during the auction. He closed the door behind her, but the alien woman didn't feel trapped. Instead, she felt free, if only for a moment. Her hands trembled and she looked around the small room. There was a simple bed in one corner, a table and a chair. A few belongings lined the walls, but it wasn't lavish. There were no signs of wealth, no indication that this human man was anything more than an ordinary person. He walked over to the table and set down a small pack of food. "You must be hungry," he said. "Eat. You're safe here." She looked at the food, her stomach growling at the thought of it. It had been so long since she had eaten anything decent. She could feel her body protesting, begging for the nourishment she had been denied for so long. But she couldn't bring herself to move to reach out for the food. The human noticed her hesitation and smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me. Just eat." She didn't know what to do. Her mind screamed at her to run, to get out before it was too late. But her body was tired, too tired to keep fighting. Her legs felt weak, her arms heavy. The human watched her quietly, waiting. She wasn't used to being watched with such patience. With a deep breath, she finally stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she picked up the food, but when she tasted it, warm, soft, and filling, tears welled up in her eyes. This wasn't just food. It was care. It was the first sign of kindness she had known in her life. As she ate, the human man sat across from her, his eyes not on her but on the empty space between them. He didn't press her for answers. He didn't ask her where she came from or why she was there. It was as if he knew there was more to her than what could be seen, on the surface. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, it was peaceful. The alien woman, despite her confusion, felt something stir within her, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. But there was still fear. Fear of what would happen next. Fear of trusting someone again, only to be let down. As she finished the food, she finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Why?" The human man looked at her, his expression calm. "Because you matter," he said simply. And in that moment, for the first time, the alien woman believed him. The escape. The sun had barely risen when the alien woman awoke in the small room. The warmth of the bed beneath her felt like a dream she wasn't sure she deserved. Her body, exhausted from years of hardship, finally relaxed. But her mind was still racing, unsure if she was truly safe, if this place was truly different from all the others. She sat up slowly, her hands trembling as she touched the soft sheets, as if afraid they would disappear. The room was quiet except for the faint sounds of the outside world, distant voices, the rustle of wind through the trees. She didn't know where she was or what was going to happen next. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the heavy weight of fear pressing down on her chest. The human man was nowhere to be seen. She felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Where had he gone? What if this was all some kind of trap? What if he was just waiting for the right moment to turn on her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the creak of the door. The human man stepped inside, holding a bundle of clothes in his hands. When he saw she was awake, he smiled, a warm, reassuring expression that made her heart flutter slightly. "I thought you might need something to wear," he said, stepping closer. "They didn't treat you well at the market, did they?" She didn't respond right away. She simply stared at the clothes in his hands. They were simple, not too elaborate, but they were clean, something she hadn't worn in what felt like forever. And for the first time, she wondered if they were meant for her. "You don't have to wear them if you don't want to," the man continued, sensing her hesitation. "But you deserve to feel comfortable. You deserve to feel human again." She didn't understand his words fully, but she did understand something. This man wasn't like the others. He wasn't forcing her to do anything. He wasn't demanding anything in return for his kindness. For a moment, she simply sat there, unsure of what to do. The freedom she felt was new, almost foreign. It was a kind of freedom she had never experienced. There was no one demanding her to work, to serve, to please them. There was only the quiet space and the opportunity to just be. Finally, she took the clothes from him. Her fingers brushed against his hand, and she was surprised at how gentle his touch was. She didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed herself to trust him, just a little. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if the words would even make sense, but she said them anyway. For the first time in a long time, she felt something deep inside, a flicker of hope. The man nodded. "You're welcome. You don't have to thank me." She rose from the bed slowly, her body still aching from the bruises, the long days of being a slave. But as she put on the clothes, something inside her began to shift. She wasn't just an alien woman who had been sold for 10 credits anymore. She wasn't just a broken slave. She was someone who had been seen, someone who had been valued. And that thought brought a warmth to her chest, a warmth that she hadn't felt in so long. She walked to the small window, her hands resting on the cool glass. Outside, the world was still dark, the early morning light just beginning to break over the horizon. It felt like the world was giving her a chance she wasn't sure she deserved. The human man stood quietly behind her, watching her as she looked out at the world. "It's a big world out there," he said softly. But you're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be. She turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if this man was going to betray her like all the others. But in that moment, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. A future, a possibility. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in it. "I'm not alone," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Not anymore." The man smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that made her feel safe. "No, you're not." And for the first time in a long time, the alien woman felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. A new beginning days turned into weeks, but the alien woman hardly noticed the passage of time. It was as if the world outside her small, humble home had disappeared, leaving only the man who had saved her and the quiet comfort of her new life. She woke early each morning to the scent of freshly brewed tea and the sound of birds singing in the distance. It was so different from the chaos and cruelty of the market. The room she now called her own was simple, but it felt like a sanctuary. There was a bed with soft blankets, a table where she could sit and eat, and the warmth of a fire always crackling in the corner. The human man, whose name she had learned was Lucas, had shown her kindness every single day. He had asked for nothing in return, not even a word of gratitude. It was as though he had done this countless times before. He worked quietly beside her in the mornings, teaching her how to cook, clean, and fix things around the house. She wasn't used to any of it, but Lucas was patient, always encouraging her, never rushing or scolding. At first she was afraid of making mistakes. Her hands trembled as she tried to chop vegetables or stir the pot, but Lucas never judged her. Instead, he smiled when she made a mistake and showed her a better way. He was gentle and steady, never pushing her beyond what she could handle. One morning, as she chopped vegetables for the stew, Lucas watched her from the doorway. He had a look of quiet pride on his face, and it made something flutter deep inside her. No one had ever looked at her like that. No one had ever cared enough to teach her anything, let alone show pride in her small achievements. "You're getting better at this," Lucas said with a smile, walking toward her. The alien woman felt her cheeks warm under his praise. She had never known the feeling of being proud of herself before, but now, with every small task she completed, a spark of confidence started to grow inside her. It was a strange feeling, one she hadn't experienced in years, if ever. "You really think so?" she asked, her voice still tentative but softer than before. Lucas nodded. "You're doing great. I'm proud of you." The alien woman didn't know how to respond. A part of her wanted to tell him that she didn't deserve his praise, that she was nothing but a broken slave who had been sold for 10 credits. But another part of her, a part that had long been hidden, wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she was more than her past, more than the pain and suffering she had endured. But the road to healing wasn't an easy one. Every now and then, when she was alone, the fear would creep back in. The fear of being abandoned, the fear of returning to that dark, cold place where no one cared about her. Sometimes, the memories of the market, the sounds of the crowd, and the laughter that followed her like a shadow would rush back. On those days, she would sit by the window, her hands folded in her lap, staring out at the world she had once thought she would never be a part of. And that was when Lucas would appear like a steady force in the storm. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to fix her. He simply sat beside her, offering his quiet presence, his gentle understanding. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor, Lucas sat next to her on the small couch. He had never pushed her to talk about her past, but today there was something different in the air, a silence that felt right. "Do you ever think about the past?" he asked softly, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. She turned her head to look at him, surprised by the question. She had thought he would never ask. She didn't know how to answer, or if she should answer at all. But his gentle gaze gave her the courage to speak. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think about where I came from, the market, the pain, the loneliness." Lucas nodded, his expression understanding. I can't imagine what that must have been like. The alien woman stared down at her hands, the old scars on her wrists, still faint but visible. She wanted to hide them, but she didn't. Instead, she let them be a reminder of how far she had come. The marks on her body were nothing compared to the marks on her heart, but they were fading now. "Do you ever think about a new life?" Lucas asked after a long pause. She looked up at him, unsure of what he meant. A new life. Was that even possible for someone like her? "I never thought I could have one," she said quietly. "But I think about it now. I think about what it might feel like. To be free." There was no judgment in Lucas's eyes, no pity, just understanding. "You are free," he said simply. "And you have the right to build whatever life you want." The alien woman felt a lump in her throat. It wasn't the kind of life she had ever imagined for herself. It wasn't grand or filled with riches. It was simple, filled with quiet moments and slow progress. But it was hers, and that made all the difference. "Maybe one day," she said softly, "I'll believe that." And with that, for the first time in her life, she let herself imagine what that life might look like. A life built on kindness, on freedom, on a future that was hers to create. For the first time, the alien woman allowed herself to dream. The confession. The days had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Every morning was filled with the warmth of sunlight streaming through the windows and the scent of fresh bread baking in the small oven. The alien woman, who had once been a slave, now moved around the cabin with a sense of belonging. She had learned to cook, clean, and tend to the garden. The small, simple tasks that once seemed impossible now filled her with a quiet sense of accomplishment. Yet, despite all the progress she had made, there was a part of her that still felt lost. She couldn't shake the fear that this life, this kindness, this peace would slip away just as quickly as it had come. The fear of returning to the darkness that had once consumed her heart lingered, no matter how hard she tried to push it aside. One evening after dinner, as they sat by the fire, Lucas glanced at her with a look that was both gentle and serious. She was curled up in a chair, wrapped in a warm blanket, her eyes focused on the flames as they danced in the hearth. The fire cast soft shadows across her face, making her appear both fragile and strong at the same time. "You've been quiet tonight," Lucas said, his voice breaking the silence. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes searching hers. "What's on your mind?" The alien woman stiffened at the question. She had been trying to hide it, trying to keep her emotions in check. But now, with the flickering, firelight casting shadows across the room, the walls she had carefully built around herself began to crumble. "I'm afraid," she admitted softly, the words coming out in a rush, as if she had been holding them in for far too long. "Afraid that one day I'll wake up and you'll be gone. Afraid that this life, this kindness will disappear. That I'll be left alone again." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her. His expression was soft, understanding, as if he had been waiting for her to say this all along. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. "I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes searched his face, looking for something, anything that might hint at the truth of his words. She had heard promises before. She had believed them, only to watch them crumble to dust. But there was something about Lucas's words that felt different, something that made her want to believe him. "I'm not like the others," Lucas continued, his tone more serious now. "I didn't bring you here to keep you in a cage. I didn't buy you because I saw you as a broken thing. I bought you because I saw you, because I believe you deserve more than what you've been given." Her heart skipped a beat at his confession. She hadn't expected him to say that, hadn't expected him to see her as anything more than a slave. But in those words, she heard something that made her feel alive, in a way she hadn't felt in years. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, she felt a lump form in her throat, and for the first time in a long while, tears threatened to fall. She blinked them away quickly, not wanting to show her vulnerability. But Lucas was already there, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. "I didn't buy you to save you," Lucas said quietly. "I bought you because I wanted to give you a chance to be who you are, not what you were forced to become. And I want you to have that. I want you to live freely, to decide for yourself what your future holds." Her breath caught in her chest, and she found herself unable to speak. How could she respond to something so simple, yet so profound? All her life she had been told what to do, who to be, what to want. But this was different. This was her choice, her freedom. And for the first time she allowed herself to think about what that could mean. "I don't know how to be free," she whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "You don't have to know right away," Lucas replied, his voice soft and reassuring. "It's a journey. You take it one step at a time, and I'll be here every step of the way." The weight of his words settled deep inside her, and for the first time the alien woman felt something shift within her. The fear, the doubt, the uncertainty, they didn't disappear completely, but they no longer controlled her. She was allowed to feel hope. She was allowed to dream of something more. For the first time she allowed herself to imagine a future, one where she wasn't just surviving, but living. And maybe, just maybe, she would allow herself to believe that it could be real. Lucas didn't speak again, but he didn't need to. His quiet presence, his unwavering belief in her, spoke louder than any words could. And as they sat in silence by the fire, the alien woman realized something. She wasn't broken. She wasn't just a slave. She was a person, with her own dreams and desires, and for the first time she felt like she had the right to pursue them. And it was in that moment, with the warmth of the fire and the safety of the man beside her, that she finally believed it. She was more than her past. She was worth more than she had ever been told, and for the first time she could see a future where she was free. The change. The air was warmer than usual that afternoon. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the quiet cabin as the alien woman worked in the garden, her hands covered in soft earth as she planted seeds into neat rows. The task was simple, yet it felt empowering. Each seed she planted was a promise, not just to the future, but to herself. She was starting to understand the importance of growth, both the kind that happened in the soil and the kind that happened inside of her. Lucas was nearby, working on repairs to the roof, hammering away with steady precision. She watched him, from the corner of her eye, admiring the way he moved. There was nothing grand or extraordinary about him, and yet there was something deeply comforting in the way he handled every task, no matter how small. The simplicity of his actions, the patience in his work. It reminded her of what it meant to be truly free. Freedom wasn't grand gestures. It wasn't the luxury of not having to work. It was in the ability to choose to live, to grow, to move at her own pace. As the days passed, she began to notice the changes in herself. She no longer flinched when Lucas spoke to her. She no longer felt the constant, gnawing fear that she would be abandoned or betrayed. She wasn't sure when it happened, but one day she realized that the fear no longer controlled her. She wasn't just existing anymore. She was living. Her hands were no longer trembling when she worked. The steady rhythm of her days began to feel like a song, each task a note in the melody of her new life. She had learned how to cook more than just the basics, how to fix the leaky pipes in the cabin, and even how to mend her own clothes. There were moments of frustration, moments when she felt like she was too far behind to ever catch up. But there were also moments when she smiled at herself, proud of how far she had come. And Lucas, he was still there, always there, not because he had to be, but because he wanted to be. He was never forceful, never pushing her to be more than she was ready to be. He simply gave her the space to grow at her own pace, quietly believing in her every step of the way. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch together watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with colors, fiery reds, soft pinks, and warm oranges. The air smelled of fresh grass and earth. "I've never really seen the world like this," she said, her voice quiet but thoughtful. "Before, I always had to hide. I didn't have time to just watch the sunset or listen to the birds. I was always worried about surviving, about what would happen next." Lucas nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's easy to get caught up in the struggle. Sometimes we forget what we're actually fighting for." She looked over at him, her heart stirring with gratitude. "You've shown me what it's like to live without fear. I never thought I could have this peace. I thought peace was something only others could have." Lucas turned to face her, his expression softening. "It's not something that's reserved for others. It's for everyone who's willing to accept it." She let his words sink in, the weight of them filling the space between them. She had always believed she was broken, that her past would forever define her. But sitting there, watching the sky fade from pink to purple, she realized that peace wasn't something given to her. It was something she had to choose for herself, and she had chosen it. "I'm not the same person I was when you found me," she said, her voice steady, her hands resting on her lap. "I don't think I could ever go back to being who I was before." Lucas smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. You've changed, and it's not just because of the freedom you have here. It's because you've started to believe in yourself." The words were simple, but they were the truth. She had started to believe in herself, and it was more than just the tasks she had learned or the safety she now had. It was the way she saw the world now, how she understood that her past didn't have to dictate her future. "I want to keep growing," she said quietly, her eyes locked on the fading light. "I want to know what it's like to truly live." "You already are," Lucas replied softly, his voice filled with quiet pride. "And you're not doing it alone." The words settled deep in her heart. She didn't have to walk this path alone anymore. The journey she had begun wasn't just about surviving. It was about discovering the life that lay ahead of her. And with each passing day, the fear that had once gripped her heart slowly faded, replaced by a new sense of strength. For the first time, she understood that true freedom wasn't just about escaping her past. It was about choosing to move forward, no matter how small the steps might seem. As the sun finally set and the stars began to twinkle overhead, the alien woman felt something shift within her, something she had never felt before. She was no longer running from her past. She was walking toward her future. True worth. The morning fog was still clinging to the hills when the sound of footsteps stirred her from her sleep. The alien woman sat up, blinking in the dim light that filtered through the window. Her body ached, not from physical pain, but from the deep, unfamiliar exhaustion of having lived with purpose, of having taken steps toward a future she never thought possible. She wasn't sure what had changed in the past few weeks, but she knew something inside of her had. There was no fear in her heart now, no gnawing doubt that today could be the day Lucas would look at her with disappointment, that he would see her for what she once was, a broken slave. No, she had learned something new about herself in the quiet moments they shared. She had learned to see herself through his eyes, not as someone who had been discarded, but as someone worthy of love, of respect. The sound of footsteps grew closer. She stood quickly, smoothing her clothes, her heart beating faster. Was it Lucas? She couldn't explain the fluttering in her chest, the way he had come to mean more to her than anyone ever had before. He was the one who had seen her, truly seen her, not as a slave, not as an alien to be owned or exploited, but as someone worth more than the sum of her bruises and scars. When the door opened, it was Lucas standing there, his face unreadable. He wasn't carrying food or tools or anything like that. He was simply standing in the doorway, his eyes focused on her. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low but steady. The alien woman's stomach twisted with sudden nervousness. Something about his tone was different. Was it final? Had she done something wrong? Was he finally going to send her away? The thought made her stomach clench, even though she knew deep down that wasn't the kind of man Lucas was. But what if? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. What's wrong? Lucas stepped inside, shutting the door gently behind him. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking again, his voice quieter now. I've been thinking a lot lately, he said, his gaze soft but intense. About you. About us. The alien woman's heart beat harder, faster. What do you mean? Since I met you, Lucas began, his words carefully chosen, I've watched you change. You've grown in ways I can't even describe. When I first found you in that market, I saw a broken woman. But now I see someone strong, someone who's fought through more pain than anyone should ever have to, and still, here you are. Still standing. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. His words washed over her, filling her with emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Was this real? Was he really seeing her this way? Or was it just another way for him to pity her? I don't want you to ever feel like you're broken again, Lucas said softly, stepping closer. Because you're not. You never were. You just needed to be shown the truth of who you are. Her chest tightened, and she looked away from him, afraid that the emotions rising within her would spill out uncontrollably. She had never been told these things. Not by anyone, not by her family, not by anyone who had ever owned her, not by the people who had passed her by. She had never known what it felt like to be seen as someone worthy of love, of trust. And yet here he was, telling her these things as though they were fact. You've given me something I didn't know I could have, she whispered, her voice trembling. A chance. A chance to be more than I was. Lucas reached out and gently cupped her face, lifting her gaze to meet his. His thumb brushed lightly over her cheek, a simple, tender gesture. You were always more than that. You just had to believe it. The alien woman felt a sudden rush of emotion, years of fear, of doubt, of pain, all crashing into her at once. She had always been waiting for someone to tell her she was worth something, waiting for someone to see her beyond her scars and bruises. And now, Lucas was doing just that. Lucas, she whispered, her voice breaking as she fought to keep the tears at bay. I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done. You've given me more than I ever thought I could have, more than I ever deserved. Don't thank me, he said quietly. You don't need to repay me, you're free, you've earned that, and all I've done is give you the space to realize it. The strength was always in you. His words struck her like a thunderclap. The strength was always in her. She had spent so many years believing that she was worthless, that she was nothing more than an object to be used and discarded. But now, standing in front of Lucas, she realized that she had been wrong. She had always been capable of more. She had always been worthy of love, of respect, of life. Her heart swelled with something she had never known. True gratitude, but also a deep, unshakable sense of self-worth. She wasn't broken anymore, she wasn't lost, she was whole. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered, looking up at him with eyes full of sincerity. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. Lucas smiled softly, his eyes filled with quiet pride. I'm glad to hear that. As the weight of those words settled in, the alien woman realized something that had eluded her for so long. True worth isn't given, it's discovered. And for the first time she understood that she was worth more than she had ever believed. She was worthy of happiness, of love, of a future. And no matter where that future took her, she was ready to walk it, side by side, with the one person who had never doubted her. For the first time she believed it too. She was enough, and that was more than enough.